This is the Toyota bZ4X, and despite what you may have heard, it isn't Toyota's first electric car. Back in the 1990s, there was actually a battery-powered version of the RAV4 that was sold in limited numbers in California and apparently won the 1995 Scandinavian Electric Car Rally. So there you go. But semantics aside, there's no doubt that Toyota is very late to the party with a fully electric modern car. Pretty much every other manufacturer has at least one in its lineup, but until now, Toyota has been focusing on hybrids. Is the bZ4X worth the wait? That's what we'll be finding out in this review, so stay with us. I'll be telling you everything you need to know, including what this car's like to drive, how many miles it can do on a charge, how long it takes to charge back up again, and of course, how it compares to all of its main rivals. But before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you've switched on notifications. And if you want to buy any new car, electric, petrol, diesel, whatever, head over to whatcar.com or Google What Car Deals to find out how much you could save. Okay, so let's start with the name, which isn't exactly catchy, is it? So the BZ bit, that stands for Beyond Zero. The 4, that relates to the size of the car, so there will eventually be a BZ1, 2, 3, and probably a 5 as well. And the X, that stands for crossover or SUV. It's bigger than it looks. It's 4.69 meters long, so actually slightly longer than a RAV4 and exactly the same size as the Subaru Solterra because, well, it's pretty much the same car underneath. The bZ4X's main rivals though are the Tesla Model Y, the Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, Ford Mustang Mach-E and the Volkswagen ID.4. All electric SUVs that are roughly the same size but look very different. Let us know which one you prefer in the comments below. You can charge the 71.4 kilowatt hour battery in just under 13 hours by using a 7 kilowatt wall box at home, or in ideal conditions at speeds of up to 150 kilowatts from a public CCS charger. That's quicker than a Volkswagen ID.4, although quite a lot slower than a Model Y or an EV6, and it means you'll be waiting at least 32 minutes for a 10 to 80% charge. With a full charge, you can officially do up to 286 miles in this all-wheel drive model, or up to 317 miles in the lighter, cheaper front-wheel drive car. That's not bad at all, it's only slightly behind the EV6 and the Model Y. And as long as you take your car to an authorised service centre every year for an EV health check, Toyota will guarantee a minimum of 70% of the original battery capacity for up to 10 years or 620,000 miles. Even if you're an Uber driver, you're unlikely to be doing that sort of mileage. So on to the interior, and if I'm honest, it's a little bit mixed. So there are some really good things, some things very impressive, but others not so much. Let's start with the positives. So the driving position, that's very good. The seat, the steering wheel, the pedals, they line up very nicely with one another. And also there's a lot of adjustment as well. So the steering wheel, that comes in and out quite a long way and up and down as well. And there's lots of adjustment in the seat as well. And you actually get electric adjustment if you go for motion, trim or above. The seat itself is very comfortable and certainly much more supportive than the one in the Tesla Model Y, for example. Quality is more of a mixed bag though. So the good news is that you've got some soft touch materials up here on the tops of the doors, not just in the front actually, but in the back as well. You've also got some nice piano black finish on the center console and some fabric stuff on parts of the dashboard as well. So that all looks and feels quite nice. But there are some cheaper plastics as well. So these door pulls, for example, they feel a little bit low rent. And actually some parts of the interior don't actually feel that well put together. There's quite a lot of movement in the center console, for example, and also on the lower part of the dashboard around the steering wheel. You wouldn't get that in a Toyota Corolla. Now, some manufacturers have gone for a really integrated design where the infotainment system sort of blends in with the driver's display behind the steering wheel. But Toyota has gone for a more traditional approach, quite like the ID.4 actually, where you have a small display behind the steering wheel, but then a completely separate display for the infotainment system that looks quite like a big iPad tacked onto the dashboard. The infotainment system, fortunately though, is much better than an ID.4's. It's not perfect, it's a little bit laggy when you're swiping between pages, but otherwise it's pretty user-friendly and you've got some shortcut icons down the left-hand side there. And also all versions come with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. Another thing I really like is that although there are some touch sensitive controls to control some aspects of the air conditioning, you do get rocker switches here for knocking the interior temperature up and down as you choose. Storage space is pretty good as well. You've got a wireless charging pad just under this lid here. You've got a couple of really deep cup holders just behind it, and you've got an enormous storage area under the center armrest there. On top of that, under this main top part of the floating center console, you've got another big tray just below it. And you've also got a couple of really big bottle holders in the door bins there. So that's great. And it makes up for the fact that this is one of very few cars on sale without a glove box. But what about space in the back? Well, as you can probably see, legroom is absolutely ridiculous. Believe it or not, this seat in front is actually set up for my driving position. I'm just over 6 foot. And look, there's absolutely loads of knee room and pretty good foot space as well, actually. The floor in the back here is completely flat, so it will be easier to fit 3 people side by side than it is in some rivals like the Volvo XC40, although most EVs, to be honest, do have a flat floor here in the back. One thing that isn't quite so good though is headroom, because although this car does have headrests, obviously, for someone of my height, they're absolutely pointless, because if I lean back, my head just hits the ceiling there. Now, I don't know if that's because this car has a sunroof. Cheaper versions don't get one of those, and quite often they do lower the height of the ceiling a little bit. So that's something we'll have to find out when we test more versions of this car back in the UK later on in the summer. Storage space is very good though, so the armrest that folds down has a couple of decent sized cup holders in it and a small tray as well. The door bins, they are a decent size, and you also get a small tray there for throwing coins or whatever else you want to. Plus, there are some mat pockets on the back of the front seats. With the rear seats up, the bZ4X has 452 litres of boot space. For comparison, an EV6 offers 490 litres and the Skoda Enyaq a massive 585 litres. In short, luggage space is nothing to write home about, but there's still plenty of room for a family holiday. You also get a small underfloor storage area for the charging cables, which is handy because, unlike the EV6 and the Tesla Model Y, the bZ4X doesn't have any extra storage under its bonnet. But while you might be able to grumble about parts of the interior and perhaps the bZ4X doesn't charge quite as quickly or go quite as far as some electric SUVs in this price point, it is really, really good to drive. Like all electric cars, it has to carry around a big heavy battery, and that often means that ride comfort is compromised, isn't particularly brilliant, and handling suffers as well. But somehow they've made this car just as good to drive as a lot of petrol or diesel cars. The ride is very, very good. I've driven this car on quite a few different types of roads already, in town, on the motorway, and it's dealing with bumps very well. It's also a very quiet car on the move. There isn't much suspension noise, there isn't much tyre noise either as well. And even at motorway speeds, wind noise is very well contained. So this is a much, much more comfortable and more peaceful car to drive around in than something like a Tesla Model Y. Now, interestingly, there aren't lots of settings for the regenerative braking system. You can either switch it off or on. On a lot of rivals, of course, you've either got paddles behind the wheel here that you can increase or decrease the amount of braking force as you're driving along. And you've also often got a one pedal mode as well, which basically means that when you lift off the accelerator, the car brings you to a stop pretty quickly. But I really don't think that affects the driving experience at all. Toyota actually says that there's no need. If you get the setting right and you get the setting natural, then you don't need to offer people multiple different choices. And Porsche actually has a very similar view. So you can't adjust the weight of the steering on its cars, and the Taycan, which is another electric car far, far more expensive than this, of course, doesn't have 17 different modes for the regenerative brakes. You can really just switch them off or on, or there's an auto mode as well. And I kind of like that. And actually, when you do need to use the brakes, they're really, really good by electric car standards. So sometimes they can be quite grabby and unpredictable. So when you slow down, all of a sudden the braking force increases or decreases, and then you have to kind of adjust how much pressure you're putting on the pedal accordingly. But here, it's very natural. It's very easy to gauge how much pressure you need to apply when you're slowing down. So that is really, really good. Now, this isn't especially quick by electric car standards. So as I said earlier, we are in the all-wheel drive model that has 2 electric motors, one on the front axle and one on the rear. And together they produce 215 brake horsepower. The front-wheel drive version, that has single electric motor on the front axle, and that has 201 brake horsepower. But even this car, the 0 to 62 time of 6.9 seconds, that's not anything to write home about these days, a Tesla Model Y would absolutely annihilate this in a drag race. But that doesn't really matter. This is an electric SUV, it's a family car. And I'll tell you, if you put your foot down, it's more than quick enough. It's way quicker than most petrol or diesel alternatives. With the price starting at just under 42,000, the bZ4X costs about the same as our 2022 car of the year, the Kia EV6. That car can do a few more miles on a charge and accept more charging power, but first impressions are that the bZ4X is even better to drive. It's just as roomy and it comes with a similar amount of standard equipment. I reckon it will be a close call, and we'll be comparing both of those cars against the Ford Mustang Mach-E back in the UK in the next few weeks. So make sure you hit subscribe and we'll let you know as soon as that video goes live. Thanks for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think about the car, what you think about the video, of course, as well. And if you want to find out more about the bZ4X, just head over to our website, whatcar.com, and read our detailed written review. Other than that, we'll see you next time.